Okay, so my name's Austin, and this is my next video in the series on why I love the novel Infinite Jest. And in this video, I am going to discuss what I think is the most frequently quoted part of the book, which is the description of certain forms of depression that occurs between page 692 and I think 698. I could be wrong about that, those page numbers. I've spent a good amount of time, especially throughout making these videos, considering how I wanted to talk about this section. It's fairly complicated to address all of the feelings I have about this part of the book. And I wasn't sure if directly taking it on was the best path. And after thinking about it for a while, I decided instead of, speaking very explicitly about this part of the book, I would discuss it in a more indirect way. Before I get into what I have to say, I want to make the comment to myself that this book is a work of art, and whatever people take from it is legitimate. My understanding and my interpretation of someone else's art isn't any more valid than anyone else. The way this book makes me feel when I read it isn't more valid than the way anyone else feels when they read it. Now, with that said, I would like, I suppose, to indirectly discuss the difference between the two forms of depression in maybe a more abstract way, where one form is described as anhedonia, and it's given as a description of what the character Hal goes through, and the other is called psychotic depression, or simply it. And that is described as what the character Kate goes through. And the novel refers to these two as being very separate things, and how one of them is much more substantial than the other. The book describes anhedonia as just a remora, a little fish that swims alongside psychotic depression, which is a great white shark. That these are very, very different things. One of the things this section makes me think of is how it can be very hard for human beings to comprehend changes in order of magnitude. That we can get a sense of how a billion is larger than a million, or not a sense, but we know a billion is larger than a million. But exactly how much larger it is very hard to comprehend without finding another way to think about it. I know that for a lot of my life, when I considered millionaires and billionaires, I knew that, billionaires definitely had more money, but both of them were just rich. And there was a difference, but there wasn't an overall huge change in wealth between the two things. I couldn't really understand how much more wealth billionaires had than millionaires until someone told me that a million seconds is 12 days and a billion seconds is 32 years. That is when I really understood how much more a billion is than a million, by comparing 12 days to 32 years. This made it very clear to me, in a way I couldn't comprehend before, how much orders of magnitude matters. And when I read this section of the book, it makes me think of something similar, where one thing is being described as orders of magnitude worse than another, and how it can be easy to view these things as much closer than they really are. It's like saying the difference between something is bad and very very, very bad. It can be hard to understand the difference between these things. This can be a challenge to anyone trying to describe something that might be orders of magnitude beyond another human being's experience. And it can be easy for things to become mistranslated, because how can you explain 32 years to someone that only knows 12 days? Anyways, that's all I have for this video.